Good morning to everyone from Boston to wherever you might be, probably from all over the world. Thank you all for being here, and a big thank you especially to our panelists today. This panel is called Medical Device Investors, and we will be addressing issues that are of interest to early stage medical device companies that are fundraising and as such attending the RESI conference. And we hope to address a lot of the issues that will help companies focus their fundraising campaigns. My name is Greg Mannix. I'm Chief Conference Officer at Life Science Nation. We do the RESI conference, but also the new 4D Meets AI conference. But before joining Life Science Nation about 5 years ago, I have a long career in medical devices myself. I worked mostly in Europe in orthopedics and then medical imaging, laparoscopy and endoscopy, and some other technologies. And for the past 5 years, I've been focusing on helping early stage companies raise money through what we do at Life Science Nation. So that's just a little bit about me. Thank you very much for attending. I'd like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. We can start with you, Norm.
Thank you. Norm Gittes, Lima Ventures in Silicon Valley, California. We invest in life science companies and we have been doing it for about 9 years. Our portfolio includes almost 24 medical device startups and a half dozen biotech startups. And I am happy to participate today.
Thank you, Norm. Benedict, could you introduce yourself?
Sure, happy to do that, Greg. Thanks for having me. Benedict Luhmann, I'm working for VI Partners. VI Partners is a typical fund advisor from Switzerland. We have been around since 2001. We are advising 2 funds. We have invested in over 54 companies up to date. And we are doing that across all kind of life science healthcare startups. So therapeutics, medical devices, digital and diagnostics, and colleagues of mine are also addressing tech and software.
Okay,
happy
great.
to be here.
Okay, great, thank you. Laurent, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, nice to have you all. My name is Laurent Schopp. I'm a doctor in veterinary medicine, talking from you today from Lausanne, Switzerland, spending half of my time in Tel Aviv. I'm running the life science activity of Kuckerman Investment House. We are investment bank dealing only with life science companies in Israel and over the world. Transaction of M&A, licensing and fundraising deal. We are the only non-direct investor here, but working all the time between entrepreneur and funds, and we bring our perspective to this panel.
Super, and we are missing one panelist who I hope will be able to join us, William Dye. When he joins, we'll have him introduce himself as well. Okay, so I would like to start today's session with some general issues around fundraising for early stage companies. After that, I would like to dedicate a section, I think it's really necessary today, dedicate a section to how the pandemic is affecting funding in the life sciences, and specifically in medical devices. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. So I encourage the audience to write your questions into the chat box, and we will try to address all of your questions at the end. So the first thing that I think is always good to just clear up with the investors is, what is your own current area of investment focus? What types of technologies in medical devices? I know some of you are investing in other areas as well, in diagnostics or digital health or drugs. But in medical devices, what are your current focus areas? and what are you looking for? Could you start, Norm?
We are area agnostic. We invest across a very wide spectrum of the devices. Cardiovascular, orthopedic, ENT, you name it. We don't have any specific sector which would excite us more than others. And we are looking at the devices that have potentially large market, have a clear market need, and have are technology based, have a strong IP, and we are open to consider very different parts of the industry.
Okay, great. Thanks. How about you, Benedict? What is your focus now?
Yeah, sorry, I think I need to agree with Norm. So same here. We don't really exclude any specific areas within medical devices. I would say for us, it's really important that it's innovative. So it's really disruptive. And that does happen, in, for example, in cardiovascular more often than in, it might be unfair dermatology, for example. And for us, it's important the stage so that we have a prototype up and running. So too early for us is a bit risky. It depends on the portfolio model of the fund you're running, and there this seems to be important for us. Yeah, I think these are the two additions I can add to Norm's comments.
Okay. Laurent, what would you say is the focus of the investment that you are working on?
We have about 10 mandates today in medical device, which are, there is a big need for innovation in some of the field in surgery and in cardiology, mainly today, and in imaging as well. We are working with companies that are beginning their sales, their commercialization. Of course, there is a big disruption in the capacity to grow in different territories because of the COVID. We'll talk about it later because people cannot move. And in device, unlike the pharma, you need to really move with the device when it's a significant, relevant size. So I would say that catching up with commercialization delay that happened because of all the constraints in hospitals mainly is one of the main topic, one of the main issue. That's for the real device. And if you put diagnostic as a device, we have a few clients that are diverting part of their activities in expanding to COVID-19 PCR level of test or blood, or even inhalation fast testing. We have a lot of innovation in this field, which is getting a lot of attention. So we have a diverse portfolio, obviously, and I would say trying to overcome the complexity of getting access to doctors, users of device in the surgery or in the outclinic.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like your focus is more on a little bit later stage companies, not so much the development stage medical device companies.
We have some, like we have few cardiology companies that are still in preclinical and needs to prove themselves. And on that one, we are working on the future, but it's they are focusing on their preclinical on pigs or sheep. So I didn't mention it, but it's part of it.
Okay. Okay, great. Another issue I'd like to ask you all about is how do you source deals? How do you go about looking for these new technologies, and how does the RESI conference play into your strategy? Could you start, Norm?
We are very active in the field, and RESI is one of the good solid sources of deals for us. Here we have been attending your January RESI conference in San Francisco each and every year. I've been a panelist on those conferences at least 3, 4, 5 times. And sometime I am getting out of the blue connections from people who got our name from Life Science Nations database. And typically, usually I do respond because I believe that Life Science Nations is a good source to accept out of the blue connections. And also, I've been serving on the so-called MedTech Innovator Selection Committee since it started 7 or 8 years ago. Each and every year, we look at many deals. I believe this year we had over 1,000 applications of medtech startups from all over the world. Also, I serve on the screening committees of the Life Science Angels and some other organizations, plus friendly VC offices, friendly family offices are sharing deals. So as a result, we are usually overwhelmed with the pipeline of good deals, and we are looking at least 1,200, 1,300 deals per year.
Wow. Okay. Good to know. Benedict, how about you? Where do you source deals?
Yeah. Surprisingly, not totally different, but roughly on an annual basis, I would also say we screen high level roughly 1,000 deals, and I would categorize them in 3 buckets. The first bucket is the most quantity and the lowest quality, and the third bucket is the lowest quantity and the highest quality. So the first bucket is really unsolicited deal flow. So we have our email address published on our website, and you get emails there, and people approach you on your personal email via LinkedIn, or I think they are also searchable in the web somewhere. So that's the vast majority, but also you really need to look for high quality deal flow in this. And having said that, right, we also need to be aware of, we are investing in Switzerland and Europe, and we can invest in North America, but we will certainly not do 100% of our deals in North America. So the second bucket is really conferences like this, referrals like Norm mentioned from previous CEOs, other folks we have syndicated with in the past. That's certainly a smaller number, but quality is certainly higher. You don't have few people thinking about a new innovative idea from the other part of the world. And I would say the third bucket is mainly in Switzerland, where we have a very close network, and one of our investors is also ETH Zurich, so great universities, and we are very closely connected to professors and institutes. So even though there might not be a legal entity yet, we are aware of some innovation and some technology and people who would like to drive something, and we are proactively not really doing incubation with them together, but motivating them and seeing if they can find some people within their network to start a startup. So these are, I think, the 3 buckets, and to be honest, I think the majority comes from bucket number 2. Mm-hmm. And rarely from bucket number 3 and bucket number 1.
Okay, good to know. Laurent, where do you source your clients who are fundraising?
Most of our deals are sourced by the VCs and family office that know will help them with their portfolio company to raise the next round. Mm-hmm. So the sourcing is the gentleman on the other side of the panel on one hand. But when we have a client and several of them are participating to the RESI this time and a few months ago and in January in San Francisco and before, I'm super happy about the way it's expanding the potential investor target with new entities from different places of the world, a different angle as well that are not super specialized in medtech. So it's really complementary, the work we do and the RESI platform and live meeting when we could. I have to say it's super dynamic, and my clients are already serial user of the RESI, and many of them are today in meeting all day. So I would say that the two approaches are very complementary and is synergistic. So I'm glad about it. Really satisfying.
Super. Very good.
And nobody paid me to say that.
So you meet with entrepreneurs who are fundraising at in different ways. But let's talk about here at the RESI conference, when you meet with a fundraising CEO, early stage medical device company, what are some of the things that you like to see, and what are some of the mistakes that you commonly see these early stage companies make? And let's focus especially on the mistakes, because I think that can be very instructive for companies that are fundraising. Can you give an example of the types of mistakes that you see CEOs make when they meet with you at RESI? Norm?
For me, the most important is the team. I want to see a team which is capable of achieving their goals. And then I want to see that how realistic are their goals. So the typical mistake is that a lot of companies are started by technologists, by engineers or physicians who understand technology. And when we meet, they start talking about technology. And yeah, I have a PhD in engineering and I like talking about technology, but I don't want to start discussing it until we discuss the market, until we discuss the business strategy, until we see everything else. And many technologists are, so the usual situation is that it's a technology looking for a market. They have a great technology and they want to develop it even further. They want to improve it. They want to make it better and better. And they believe that customers will come when their technology is out there in the open, for example, FDA approved or whatever. And I always tell them, guys, you really need to start from customer discovery. If you want to spend several years on this project, if you want to spend a long part of your life on this startup, please talk to potential customers. Please discover what is their thinking, how they view the market, how they view the competition, what their problems are you going to solve. Don't tell me, and if it's a young team, sometimes they tell me, oh, our professor thinks that it's the right solution. Wonderful, but what do practical doctors think? Are you targeting academic centers or small community hospitals or outpatient settings? Who are the customers? What are the competitors? What are the problems of competitors that you can solve? And then, please, then you can find technology or develop a new technology which hopefully will resolve the actual problem. But this, in my mind, is the most common mistake, that it's a technology looking for a market instead of market needs looking for the appropriate technology.
Very, very good point. Yeah, I've seen that many times. How about you, Benedict? What do you think? What do you see as a common mistake that companies
Yeah, I
make?
think I would rather call it area of improvement, and I see two areas. The one is really quick fixes, what you can do right to make the most out of the 30 minutes you typically have in these virtual meetings on conferences. And I think I would recommend everybody to share pitch decks up front. I rarely see people who only share pitch decks via, you can't really download the PDF and you can only look up the slides online. I really don't like that. So make it hard for your counterpart. Does make sense in some cases if you're looking for funding and if you perceive that this is a limited resources. I would rather serve your counterpart than make it hard for them. I think you should also be aware of what they have invested into kind of the portfolio companies, and making a link to some of their previous experiences is really powerful, as always in life. I just don't really see it happen many times. So I think that's an easy, quick fix, right? Just spend 10 minutes to be prepared to know a little bit about his or her background and the advisor, the company, the portfolio, not in detail. Being structured, I mean, many people will tell you, I think the biggest difference from life science healthcare compared to other industries is enthusiasm, and we're working in an environment where I think everything here is impact, right? You have an impact on people's life, on how patients are treated. So I think there could be a huge enthusiasm about what we bring to people, and I rarely feel that. So a little bit more selling, a little bit more emotions will clearly help and won't do any harm. On the other side, talking about what Norm elaborated on, what are reasons I don't feel I'd like to continue the conversation or invest. I totally agree. I think it's people tend to be well informed on the technology and how it all works and how the prototype is assembled and manufacturing. What comes later on, but is super important to make it happen and make it fly, is market related. Understanding customers, understanding healthcare systems. They might differ or will differ in many cases. Health economics is a super important point. Drivers, right? I'm always asking who's being hurt if you implement that. Somebody will lose, right? You will win if you're successful. Some other people will lose. How will they look at what you're bringing to the market? So all these kind of questions. I understand that small startups are limited in resources, but talking to real people in the real world doesn't cost a lot, and you can do it in you don't need to contract a market research organization. Power might be limited, but talking to 5 or 10 physicians, 5 or 10 payers, pick everybody in the ecosystem you want to be active in and try to understand their point of view. What would motivate them to support you or not to support you?
Yeah, I agree with Benedict that another common mistake, especially among the first-time founders, is too much secrecy, emphasis on confidentiality, and fear of leaking their secrets into the open. And usually when we talk to experienced CEOs, they understand that our goal is to help and support, and they understand that they should share as much information as they can in order to get us to the point when we can start due diligence and maybe sign their non-disclosure agreements. But inexperienced founders tend to start from asking to sign their non-disclosure agreements. And for me, it's a non-starter. We are looking, as I said, at over 1,200 startups a year. If I start signing 4 non-disclosures a day, it's a full-time job. So yeah. I'm telling them we will sign if we decide to start due diligence, but first you need to convince me that it makes sense to start talking to you, to sign it, to spend several weeks on investigating, on digging in and investigating your space and your product and your technology. And so it's, and as Benedict said, sometimes they don't want to send you their deck. They want you to see it on the doc send on the internet, but you cannot download it. And for me, like for Benedict, it's a non-starter. If they are too secretive, I prefer to move on.
Yeah, I've had CEOs ask me if they need to sign an NDA with each investor before they meet at RESI. And my answer is that that's just not practical and it's really not necessary. And everyone should have a non-confidential deck that they can send to an investor without having signed any NDA, right?
Exactly, yeah. We don't need their secret sauce right away, but we need them to develop the ability to explain their technology in the way which does not threaten their secrets.
Yeah. Laurent, what do you see as the most common areas of improvement? I like Benedict's phrase better than mistakes. It's more positive. Areas of improvement. What do you see? Companies commonly needing to improve.
We have established a process with all our clients for a few years already to do simulation grill of the CEO before letting him go to the field and meeting with investors in order to identify and to be very, very tough on the way he's presenting and showing telling the story of his company and his technology in order to really go to storytelling and explaining why and how he's going to develop and to have a successful company. They ask, I believe the main mistake is, even for serial entrepreneurs that are doing regularly or several companies, it's the lack of training to this kind of interaction. They have to be super prepared. And of course, you need a non-confidential deck and a very detailed confidential one for a second level of discussion. But my main point is to be completely trained, to have been asked before the key question, the one that are hurting, either in the IP or in the financing or in the management, in order to be able to answer. No company has 100% positive. No company has no issue, doesn't exist. So they have to be ready to answer to objections. And we train them for that until they get a credible answer, which is full of self-confidence, even if some of the aspects are difficult to solve. So for me, the key, one of the key when you start having a interaction with potential investors is to be ready to answer the tough one, not to present the easy part, which is how beautiful they will solve or meet one of the medical needs. It's more on the where is the problem, where is the risk, where will be the issue in 2 years or in 5 years in safety or in competition. And that we work a lot with our clients. And I know that it's very useful because I see the difference with those that say, no need, I'm ready.
Okay, super. Several of you brought up the issue of first-time entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurs who have a scientific background or an engineering background and maybe not so much experience or any experience in running a company. Are those entrepreneurs, those first-time entrepreneurs, are they excluded from your opportunity of investing in them? Or if not, what can they do to supplement their lack of personal experience to convince you to invest in their company? Norm, what do you think about that?
I do not exclude them. I do not exclude anybody as a class, as a type of founders. No, I do have a preference for people who, from the industry, who understand the industry problems, but young people who just graduated, I am open to talk to them and to see how fast learners are they, how are they open to my advice, to somebody, to coaching, to somebody else guidance. And usually, and whether they're experienced or not, we prefer not to invest in complete strangers. We want to develop relationship. We want to observe them over time and to see how they react to various obstacles, how they progress, how they talk to us and to the others, how well they develop relations with potential customers, advisors, investors. Usually it's at least, usually we would like to watch the company for at least 3-6 months before we invest. But if to look at the deals we invested in this year, we have been looking at them for at least 9-12 months before we invest. So we would like to develop relationship. We would like to give a lot of free advice and see whether they are open to it and whether they and how they are proceeding. And experience is something which they can learn on the way, but we just want to see how good learners and how open-minded they are to learn and to move forward. And I always tell a startup that, not always, sometimes I got excited and say I want to start due diligence, but in 90% cases I say that, you know, it may be too early for us, or we don't have much experience with your team. So stay in touch and we consider us for your next round, but please bother us as much as you can and send us regular updates and ask questions. And the more you stay in touch and the more we hear from you, the more we keep you in the forefront of our pipeline. And when you are ready for the next funding round, we will be already warm bodies. We will know we will be ready for your funding. We will know how the history of your company. So I always recommend startups that I like to stay in touch independently, whether we consider investment in the current round or we prefer to delay till the next round.
Yeah. Okay. Good. How about you, Benedict? What do you think about first-time entrepreneurs, and how does that play in?
Yeah, I think it's totally okay. It happens, and I think it has its merits. I think the earlier a company is, the more natural I perceive that also first-time founders are part of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me it's important what Norm said. It's about coachable, being open for change, and change also means it's a team play, and nobody, including investors, is set there forever. So being able to reflect about limitations and capabilities and ability to learn, and maybe limits of that ability over time in light of a joint journey and difficulties or opportunities coming along. I think that's the most important point. And then I would say it's not about one person, it's about the team. So even though one founder might be junior or first-time founder, It's also about the network he or she's able to build around the team, the core team, and that all comes together. And in the end, it's a trust business, and it's hard to convince somebody in one single meeting. Well, I would say even impossible. So having the mindset of well, it's a journey and getting to know each other. The startup, the investor, the startup, co-investors. That's an important piece. So right, if you're a first-time founder, there's little you can do. You can't change your
No.
life. So I mean, what's the point, right? Make the best out of it. Have a good idea and run and be motivated and full of the energy, and
Yeah.
you can do it. Other people have done it before, and
Everybody has a first time, right?
yeah, everybody started this way.
But can it help if they have the right advisors and like on their advisory board, things like that? Will that help you have more confidence?
Exactly, but that's also true for the third-time founder, right?
Mm-hmm.
If he comes up with a world-known expert in the field, if we just have a portfolio company where the CEO was able to recruit one really awesome professor from the US, where everybody is asking, hey, why is he joining your small board for a Swiss company? He could join multiple boards of NASDAQ listed companies, but he was able to build a relationship. He was able to motivate him, and having him on board really makes a big difference in the next financing round. So if this is success based on the ability of the CEO or pure luck, it's possible. And of course, everybody should try to build a world-class team around the startup. Yeah. But that's also true for investors, right? We're also always looking at syndication partners, and there's a difference between premium league US funds or 20 small investors from all over the world. And, sure. And it makes it different. For us, it's a super important alignment of interest. And I think understanding other people's interest and motivation is part of the game.
Okay. Laurent, what do you recommend to first-time founders?
We meet a lot of first-time founders in Israel that are coming with technology from either the military that are transferred to life science, and medtech in particular, or coming from many incubators. So we have a lot of young MSc, PhDs, engineers with great ideas. The main issue will be the IP and the solidity of their technology. And the second one, who they are asking to help them in order to set up. And incubators is a great way to avoid the first timers, yeah, to develop their startup. If they are completely alone, we try really to analyze the technology and to help them to have the entrepreneur is never alone, but to have a good CSO, good COO that will help him to continue. It's in this time, in this situation, it's all about people. So it's more or less a third of our client portfolio. Sometimes extremely successful, sometimes many issues, because they have to learn in the same time to develop their startup, which is too new, and the new is always a risk. You can have a new company, but I would say we work mainly in Israel and Switzerland, where the startup community is quite vivid and alive. And you very often find people to help you and to help you avoiding making the big beginner's mistake. And when we work with them, it's even, we can help on that if they listen, and I will make a difference between some generation. The very young generation is much more difficult. They have a completely different, not the millennials that are now becoming entrepreneurs, have a completely different way of working with social impact and environmental concerns. which they want to put everywhere, while the other ones, the guys that are above 30, have a different way of working. It's very interesting, the combination.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's interesting, Laurent, that you brought up the incubators in Israel. I had the opportunity to visit several incubators last year there in Israel, and it's really a fantastic program that a lot of them have, and I think it really is helping the first time founders to to learn about creating a company and the right steps. And I think Israel has a really good program there. So congratulations on that. Yeah. Okay. We don't have too much more time, but I don't want to not talk about how the pandemic is affecting your business and your outlook for investing in medical devices during this complicated time. So if you could tell me how the pandemic is affecting your business. Obviously, you're not traveling to conferences around the world. But is it possible to check out a prototype of a medical device on Zoom? Is that possible? What do you think, Norm?
So this year has changed my view of it. Until this year, I was always sure that I need to meet the team in person. I need to visit. I always visited their place to see not only the CEO, the founder, but the team. I wanted to see the status of the product. I wanted to touch it and to feel that what is happening at their facility. But this year, everything has been on Zoom, and it looks like to us, Zoom has been more or less sufficient. We terribly miss in-person interactions, but Zoom has been enough to judge the quality of the team and even to judge the quality, the state and the quality of the prototype. So to me, the video interactions have become acceptable.
Enough to make an investment in a company? Would you make an investment without having met the company in person?
We are open to it, but we haven't done it yet because, again, we prefer not to rush with our investments upon the first meeting. So the 3 or 4 investments that we have done so far over the first 8 months have been with the companies that we met in person before the lockdowns.
Yeah.
But we are open we are very seriously considering now investments in the companies that we haven't met in person yet.
Okay, good to know. How about you, Benedict?
Yeah, I agree. It was helpful to reflect about how much physical meetings you really need versus virtual meetings. In the end, I would still argue that meeting somebody face-to-face is clearly preferred. And let's be fair, right? Even if you would have done an investment in the Corona crisis based on virtual meetings only, you haven't seen the outcome yet. So we have done one investment so far in the crisis, and my colleague went to Spain to look at, to meet with the team for 2 days. And I think it was helpful. And also in the future, I would clearly recommend and try to do that. But having said that, we just did a virtual facility tour in the US in a manufacturing site and research site. And it was new and somehow also strange, but it clearly gave us a better impression than nothing. It's hard to compare to a physical meeting, and I would still argue a physical meeting would have been better. But I think it made us reflect if even if it would be possible. I mean, theoretically it would have been possible. But there are costs, risks, and resources associated with such a meeting. And I think it is a nice opportunity to reflect about some habits you have lived for some time, and it's a bit reshaking and reshuffling things.
So right now, if you wanted to come to meet with a company in the US, you would have to do a 14-day quarantine.
Yeah, well,
So
we just recruited a new team member, and he came to visit us in Switzerland, and flying back to his home country in Europe, he had to go under quarantine for 14 days.
Yeah.
This is what I mean. This is commitment, right? This is what he has done.
Yep.
We gave him an offer. I
Yeah.
won't tell his name yet here, but so this is what he did, right? And
Yeah.
I think before we invest up to, I think this is a question here in the chat, right? We typically invest up to 10. We can invest up to 10% of the fund volume. So this is in our case roughly around 10 million. Over the life cycle of our investment in a company, it's worthwhile to check if this is an option, right, Greg? I wouldn't say I always, in any case, would like to do that, but within Europe and some countries, it's not a big issue anymore at the moment, right? It might be different tomorrow. Okay,
very good. Laurent, what about you? How has the pandemic changed your way of doing business?
Not difficult to work and to analyze and to due diligence, but to close deals, it's a challenge. We have closed deal in March and April that started before, so the people could do remote signature, etc. And we are very, very grateful to that.
Yeah.
Today, we had requests from Chinese medtech that wanted to see a big device that we sent over. The problem was the training to use it and how to use it. So it's very complicated. But most recently, I've seen some CEOs that are completely dedicated, doing exactly what Benedict was mentioning. Okay, I go there, I do the one quarantine, another one, because it's the right time to do it. And I was very, very impressed because it's still feasible to travel. I'm just coming back from the Emirates because of this big peace treaty with Israel. I came back yesterday. I'm myself in quarantine here in Switzerland, coming back.
Yeah.
But I saw CEOs doing it several times, US coming back, and they really, it's super appreciated. It's a lot of constraint, but it's feasible. And for very small device, it's still feasible to send a small batch and having some video training. But to close deals, I believe you need to move and be face-to-face. There is no, at least the core people, one or two from each team.
Okay. Yeah, no, very, very interesting, challenging times, but, you know, and I know that there have been a lot of deals closed during the pandemic that, as you guys mentioned, you had begun the conversation before when you had met in person. But if these travel restrictions go on or even get worse in the next few months, and it goes on for 6 or 8 more months or another year, we don't know. We'll have to see how we adapt to that new situation, right?
I completely agree.
Yeah,
okay, I
but let's
believe
be
we
fair.
have a few questions from the audience.
Just if you I think in the short run it's a burden. I think nobody will argue that it's super helpful. I mean, there might be, I always talk about fundraising. For us, it was certainly not helpful. We were fundraising and we were able to close in April our own fund, our additional fund. So that was not helpful. In the long run, I would argue it puts some additional focus on life science healthcare and its importance for society. So I'm pretty sure that public funding will increase and also investors will follow that trend. For startups raising funds, going to funds like us, it again was not helpful, but I'm also optimistic that there in the long run it will help. And then talking about portfolio companies, we had losers and winners. And little you can do, right? I mean, we can all complain about it, but I'm optimistic that it's hurting momentarily, but in the long run, it will be for most of us in this industry helpful. Neutral, helpful.
I'm glad to end on a positive note. So thank you for that, Benedict. And I too, just from what I'm seeing, I'm hopeful that this pandemic will actually teach us new ways to interact, and that business will go on and is going on. And there will be investments, there will be deals. We will adapt. We're already adapting, and it's looking good. So if it's okay with you guys, let's take a few questions from the audience. My colleague Joey has been tracking the questions. Do you want to come on, Joey?
Yep, for sure. So we got 2 questions from the audiences. I'm just going to read it out loud for everybody. Okay. Greg, could you ask what average check sizes are depending on stage and perhaps some valuation examples?
Oh, okay. That's a very specific question. Okay. Norm, can you take a shot at that?
So we are a small fund. We are limited to 1 million per startup. And so in total over the life of the deal. So we typically invest somewhere between 200 and 300,000 in the seed round, about 400, 500 in the A round, about 500, 600K in the B round. So to keep the total around $1 million. And we never ever invested in a foreign company. We invest only in domestic startups.
Only US, okay. Benedict, what are your typical check sizes, and any comments on valuation?
Well, yeah, let me start with checks. So we can go up to 10% of the fund volume. So in our evergreen first fund, it's 10 million. For the current fund, because we only had first closing, it's 7.5 million. I think that's helpful for startups to understand what is the fund advisors are investing from, what's their portfolio strategy, right? What's the ticket size they can do maximum. And in the end, all investors will calculate over multiple funds. So they will ask, what does it take for an exit? What's the current valuation? What's a possible valuation at the exit? And they are shooting for multiples of 3 to 5 to 7 timers, right? So this is a rather simple math you can do yourself. So depending on, I mean, in the end, the question is what's the current valuation an investor feels comfortable investing, and that depends on how long does it take, what does it take money-wise and resources-wise and timeline-wise, and what's a realistic exit option. And this is then boiling down to valuations. And of course, if the market is playing well and many people are trying to be part of the game, valuations might rise, but there are certainly limits to, and this is driven by their own business model. It's not good or bad will, it's just only few people own the money they're investing. We typically also have LPs where we promise to do some stuff and we are obliged to these promises.
Right. Laurent, what do you see as check sizes for medical device companies?
The range is very, we work with companies that are raising at least 10 million. And sometimes we are going to very earlier round and smaller. But today I've seen the range is super big, from 1-2 million total round to 60 million to some of our close colleagues in Israel in imaging. So it's in private. I'm talking a private placement, of course, before any IPO. I've seen recently many companies that did not succeed in private placement going to Sydney Stock Exchange, before it was Singapore, where they can raise smaller amount in their early stage. It's very interesting up to 10, 50 million, it's not big. And if you have some funds that are ready to take, to do the pre-IPO and some strong commitment, they can continue raising small amount in this kind of stock exchange. And one of the most popular, at least in Israel, but I know it's going abroad, is the crowdfunding. That is a very strong complementary way on devices that are easy to understand by the public to get some funding. And we have seen very successful run, especially now that you do everything online.
Right. Okay, very interesting. Well, I think, unfortunately, I think that concludes our panel. We've run out of time. I'd like to really thank our panelists for your great insight. It's been fantastic having you. And I hope that we will meet in person sometime in the future, because there's no substitute for meeting in person. But for the time being, it was great seeing you on Zoom today. And thanks very much for being here.